All right, as Andrew said, I'm Brian Anderson. I started Notionovus about 6 years ago and didn't really know where I wanted to go when I first started out, and I've pivoted a few times. Last year, actually, I didn't realize this until I started collecting my materials for this presentation, but last year in September, I did this same presentation. Okay, I talked about knowing the source of your food. I talked about how we can link farmers to customers, but it was all smoke and mirrors and imagination, and so this is kind of a progress report more than anything. This is reintroducing Peoria to the concept of diner diver, and so on that I'll just dive right in. So I'm going to talk about three things basically. Why are we doing this? What are we doing? And then how if there's time left over, I can address some of how we're getting the things we want to get done. So the agriculture and the food service industries have been, and maybe this is too strong a word, maybe not, technological laggards. Okay, when I was a very young boy, I always wondered why they didn't put more information on the menus at restaurants. That it was just like the name of the dish, a description of the dish, and how much it was going to cost, the price. And it hasn't really improved that much, primarily because menus at restaurants have very limited real estate. But then I thought that would change when the web came along, when people started using technology in a more ubiquitous manner. I thought, well, we'll have menus on smartphones, and that really never came to fruition. So about a couple of years ago, I started having these ideas about how can we kind of usher this along a little bit faster. So why I believe I'm doing this because the technology is coming. I think eventually we're going to get to the point where we use our smartphones for just about every interaction, and if the food service and the agricultural industries don't essentially they're not given tools to help accelerate their technological adoption, then they're going to continue to lag. So anyway, basically it's all about finding those people in the food service industry who are doing it right. There's a big problem with farmers who they're doing everything right, but as soon as their produce is on a truck, all that information about how they're using the right fertilizers, the right pesticides, the right herbicides, that all vanishes as soon as their food goes to market. And really what I want to do is I want to build out a transparent food supply chain so you can see into the operations of your food suppliers. I also want to discourage myopia, nearsightedness. Right now we seem to be trying to make the next season's harvest, trying to fill the customers who are sitting in our restaurant, fill their bellies with good food, but we're not really thinking in terms of, what is McDonald's going to do? What is Amazon going to do? What are some of these companies who are really embracing technology going to do to the food service industry in the next 5 years that we're not even aware? So I want to make sure that we lift our heads up and we look out in front of us. Also, I want to bring more of free market efficiency into this space. We're already there. People are already disrupting the food service space. They're just not disrupting it for everybody, and I think that's the key. If you think about the way farmers farmed in the 1800s and the 1900s, there hasn't been a whole lot of change in the way farmers have been doing. They're just getting less and less value for their product, and I want to try to change that up by allowing them to publish data and get paid for it. They're already having their data mined, but it's being mined by companies, big companies who supply equipment to farmers, and they're not necessarily able to keep that data for themselves. And also local restaurants. You know, the big chain restaurants are awash in their own data, but local restaurants are in a bit of a data desert, if you will. And then finally, I came up with this a few weeks ago, this little saying, and I like it, so I'm going to keep using it until somebody says stop using it. Transparency is the rock in our sling. Okay, if you think about David and Goliath, if you think about, well, how does somebody take on a behemoth like Tyson or Cargill or Amazon or McDonald's, the best way to take them on is to be transparent, because any company to get that big has things they want to hide. And what's that?
I just chuckled.
Yeah. So I think that the best way for David to address a Goliath is to use transparency. That's my philosophy anyway that I'm sticking to. So what are we going to do? We're going to Amazon the stuffing out of this thing. We're going to create data providers. We're going to allow people to provide data to a network of people who are sharing data. We're going to, we believe again that transparency is where it's at, but technology is required for transparency, and that's where we see the gap. We want, most of all, though, for consumers, producers, and vendors all to benefit. We don't want this to be a win-win-lose in any case. So, all right, so what are we going to do? Grocery stores, farms, all these places where data exists but isn't being captured are going to have some kind of a small board computer, like a Raspberry Pi, on site to collect all of their information, and then they're going to share this peer-to-peer style. Okay, we're not going to have some server out, you know, in Amazon or out in the cloud that captures everybody's data, and then if they're good to us and pay us a lot of money, we'll give them their data back. It's yours. If you're generating it, you're keeping it. And then also, basically, in order to ensure that, we're creating this captive portal. Now, you're all probably familiar with, you stay in a hotel, and you want to get to Wi-Fi, you want to get to the internet, and you get stopped by what's called a captive portal, which is that hotel's local website, and it wants to know what your room number is, maybe your first name or something like that, just to make sure that it's okay for you to use the. Well, we're going to be creating captive portals in all of these spots where if you'll sign up on what they're called SSIDs, but on a Wi-Fi network, and that Wi-Fi network will automatically take you to the app. And I'm going to show you the app now. There we go. So this is Diner Diver, or an example of what Diner Diver might look like and some of the functionality. We don't have this set up yet to actually install someplace, but we're very close to getting it set up. And really what I want you to think of is kind of an interactive menu. So somebody came in, they sat down, they logged into the Wi-Fi at the restaurant, which is named the Farmer's Table, and they started scrolling through the menu, and they selected the brunch menu. They could have selected the dinner menu or the kids menu or what have you, and then inside the brunch menu they thought, well, I'm going to have a quiche today. And so the quiches come up, and with those quiches, you get your price and you get your calories per serving and things like that. If you, let's say, we click on a quiche, so I put my finger on a quiche, up comes the ingredients. I'm also thinking about putting, you know, those nutrition facts that you'll see on just about every package of. I'd like to build the functionality out so that it's not just showing you the ingredients, it's showing you how many fat grams, how many carbohydrate grams, etc. So that, which I've never seen in a restaurant today. I don't know if anybody's out there doing it already, but I really want the diners to benefit from all the information that the restaurant can provide, and as well I want them to benefit from the information that the farmers can provide. And so for that, some of these ingredients here have hyperlinks. Okay, and also, so some of these things up here, so based on your habits using Diner Diver, it's going to know kind of what's important to you, what's maybe not important to you. Maybe price is important to you. So for example, I can click on this price and then I can say I'm not going to spend over $7 or over $7 and everything's fine. But let's say I don't want to spend over $5. I can limit my which dishes come up. I can also enter in an ingredient like, for example, let's say I really love mushrooms. And so I can type mushrooms because I'm looking for something with mushrooms tonight. And then only those dishes on the menu that have mushrooms in them will then display. So it seems to me like that would be a more efficient way to dine. But basically the whole thing is about this supply chain. So we want to be able to see where the mushrooms came from. And if you click on mushrooms, it'll take you to a site that has not just the farmer who grew the mushrooms, but also because the restaurant knows which lot number and which batch number that those mushrooms are coming from. You'll be able to drill down once you get to this part on when those were planted, when those were harvested, what type of fertilizer was used in the soil, etc. What conditions, environmental conditions, etc. So that's pretty much all I've got to show you. We can talk about that a little bit later, but I need to get back to the presentation. And really the rest of it is about how we're going to make this happen. I already mentioned that we were going to use a distributed application and not necessarily rely on a central server. We want the data to reside where it's sourced. So we want the farmers to own their own data and possess their own data, and they can put it in the cloud if they want, but that's an option. It's not the way we are going to design it. So we won't even know what our farmers are keeping as data. And then micro exchanges of data and value. When a restaurant needs a farmer's data, when a farmer needs restaurant data, or when a farmer needs one of their suppliers' data, all this information flows back and forth, and the middleware, the software that ties all these different nodes together, uses micro transactions in the form of cryptocurrency to compensate the person who published the data at the expense of the person who wants to see it, which is not the way we currently use the internet. And then getting back to, a lot of people say, well, how are you going to keep people honest on this thing? And I think it goes back to reputation. If you're going to be publishing data, you want people to know that's accurate, it's truthful, it's timely, you're going to publish the good with the bad, those kinds of things. So in order to join this network of people who share data about their food supply, we're going to rely on not just a license agreement, but the fact that if somebody violates it, their reputation is going to get dinged. And that's the way, I guess, the free market works. So I think that's it. How did I do on time? Don't tell me. Ooh.
So we'll open up this time now for a Q&A if anybody has any questions.
Yeah, questions? Yeah.
What does the relationship look like with the farmer? As in the information they put on, is this like an ongoing combination of logs and pure supply chain transparency?
So I guess I did skip a little bit here. I didn't talk much about workbenches and portals. I felt like I was running out of time, and I was right. When a farmer signs up, he'll basically be given a workbench. And that workbench is what he'll use to, instead of writing stuff down on paper and sticking it into a steel file cabinet, he'll be publishing it to his own data repository. And so the workbenches are there just to make it easy for publishers to publish data and for restaurants to consume data. So the workbenches are not portals. Portals are kind of read-only. Workbenches are actual tools that you use to interact with the data. And so, did that answer the question?
I think so. I think your Achilles heel is farmers and information availability and just the process and how they operate on a daily basis.
Right.
Whether the information, I mean, they know it, but there's a whole new process that needs to be put in place for them to provide it.
Right, absolutely. And that's why I'm counting on workbenches. Okay, every farm's going to operate differently. Every farmer's going to want to interact differently, share different amounts of data. There are going to be some farmers that are going to want to Amazon the stuffing out of it, like I said earlier. And there are some farmers that are like, I guess I have to tell you when I harvested the grain or whatever, for legal obligations. And we want to build our workbenches that are sensitive to what a farmer wants to put on there.
The answer to that question, I'm a farmer. You want information on me?
Yeah.
So this incentivization that he's creating here is titanic change for the farming community. And so the 65, 70-year-old might have a tougher time. The 45, 55-year-old, a little bit less than a 30-year-old less, will latch on this quickly. But he's correct about the industry being laggards. But if you want information, you can pay for it. Let the market tell me what herbicides, what insecticides, what pathogens I have or don't have, and let the system work.
So a follow-up question. So you want to get paid, Brian wants to get paid, and so who pays in the end?
If you go to
So we're setting up what's called in the industry, in the IT industry, a PubSub type of repository. If you publish data to the repository, you're like putting books on the shelves of a library. And somebody who wants that data is going to have to go through the librarian to get that information. They'll have to pay for it at that time. And we're not talking hundreds of dollars for, nobody is going to get rich. Nobody's going to get rich off of the data that they publish. But the goal really is to start that flow of data. And if you walk up to a farmer and say, you've got to spend 20 hours a month sitting on a keyboard typing out your data, he's going to want to know who's paying him for that. Okay, and that's really what we're trying to solve here, is the issue of there is not digitally available data, and we don't want to allow the farmer to publish that digitally available data on a web blog where Google can just come up and scrape that, thank you very much, farmer, and not compensate that farmer for what he's done.
So in the end of the day, as a diner, what can he add to the bottom line of my bill?
Right. So if I'm a restaurant, I'm going to want this because I'm going to be able to show my customers how concerned I am with the quality of their food. Okay, I'm going to explain to them that I got the best mushroom farmer in the area. I serve only locally sourced vegetables. Those are the types of things that bring new customers in and increase customer loyalty. So yeah, the restaurant's going to maybe pay, and the restaurant can put a cap on how much they're willing to, pay the farmers for their data. Data will be cash. So if I So if I go, if my restaurant, if some diner in my restaurant clicks on my mushrooms, as long as it's lot number 112, batch number 77, I've already paid for that from the farmer, okay? I've already given him the 20 cents or whatever for that information, on all that information, so that I can now serve it up to my diners, and if somebody else comes along and clicks on. So there are going to be caching strategies and things like that to make sure we don't bankrupt the diners and grocery stores and delicatessens, but we want to be able to allow that data to flow through them to the customers who are actually buying the product. Ashley, did you?
Yeah, I like your quote that you said earlier, transparency is the rock in our sling, and I think that consumers today are really valuing transparency within companies, especially the younger generation, so I see this as something that a lot of people will appreciate. I do wonder, do you think that farmers will be resistant to sharing their data if they are, you know, using pesticides or insecticides? And because consumers, there's a big disconnect, of course, between consumers and the farmer. A lot of consumers don't understand farming, and so do you think that there will be any, I don't know, hiccups with that process and the transparency there?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now we have a very immature communication channel going between consumers and farmers, and I think that a lot of that has to do with the fact that we've put so many middlemen in between the farmer and the consumer. You don't get to have that dialogue or that discussion. And what we're hoping is by increasing so giving a farmer a way of explaining how they do and why they do what they do to their consumers while they're sitting in the restaurant about to order food that contains their produce, I think that's going to start opening up that dialogue a little bit. And that's really, again, it's transparency, it's the ability for the farmer and the consumer to, you know, once again connect like they used to back in the early 1900s and 1800s.
Part of the issue here, like you're saying, is the subjectivity we're going through now, organic, all natural, non-GMO. We do not know what that is, I'll be honest. I grow for Tyson, used to grow for Sara Lee. Those are procedures, process agreement, but as far as real, you buy a piece of meat, fruit, you really don't know. There's no test for that. And so what makes this so hugely unique what Brian's doing is that you go to the Subways and McDonald's, the young brands, they have nothing to market. I mean, it's fresh, it's wholesome. Well, it's getting tone deaf now. Tell me more. And his system allows clear to the intimate details. Like today, I raised turkeys. I picked up 2 dead turkeys. It's a natural call. Well, some people may not like that, but this education begins that you lose animals, a very small amount. So there's an education, but the agriculture people do a lousy job at it. The marketing people of the retailers are your experts to do it. And they just have no information. They'll glean through whatever they want to figure out and separate, makes the differentiator of their other products. Now I'm getting down to us farmers, like, yeah, you pay me a certain amount, I'll tell you stuff.
Yeah.
No question, but you're still going to get wholesome, fresh food, safe and wholesome. And that's what the meat industry has done quite well at.
And the other side of this is consumer sentiment is often fickle. You know, one day we're super concerned about GMO, and the next day we're super concerned about antibiotics, and that's not always driven by science. Sometimes it's driven by very political reasons, and that's one of the things that we basically decided. I mean, Steve works with me. He's kind of the farmer who whispers in my ear about farming and how you want to treat the farmer, etc. So, but the consumer, again, I think there's a lot of improvement that we can do to educate consumers about the food they're eating, and I'm hoping that this provides an adequate platform for that. Yeah, Dee.
I'm curious, who do you have sitting at your design table when you're developing this? Do you have a farmer? Do you have I'm assuming software engineer? Do you have anybody that's a different type of thinker at your table?
Well, yeah, I have a bunch of people at my table. Kayla Phillips is at my table, and Reuben Cummings is at my table, and Steve Sin and Francie Heinrichsen, she's also at my table. And I'm always looking for more people to inform me. There's really, you know, I have a weakness, and that is when I get to coding or to thinking about software architecture, I tune most of the rest of the world out. And that's what I'm trying to maybe work on by building this Diner Diver app, is to get out there and talk to the people who actually might use my product. Again, I designed a lot of this because this is what I kind of wish I had as a kid, you know, going through a menu at McDonald's and not knowing, you know, what foods had celery in them, or not celery, lettuce in them, that kind of thing. So I kind of built this out of what I wish restaurant menus, how I wish they worked. But I might be all wrong, and I'm willing to be corrected by the marketplace.
I see an application with maybe like Weight Watchers,
Yeah.
and moms groups, and then the online grocery service like Drive.
Sure, absolutely, yeah. There's a, the way I'm designing it is those little buttons can be essentially customized per restaurant and per diner. So you can, let's say you can modify Diner Diver so that when you bring Diner Diver up on your phone, it gives you a Weight Watchers button, and then you can click and then sort and search by those foods at this restaurant that might be approved by Weight Watchers, etc. So,
Just to build on that too, I wonder if you can start with, you know, allergies or any sort of specific dietary
absolutely.
restrictions, and then actually go and, you know, get these key customers first, or users, and then that becomes a big thing in terms of how you can get the next step.
Right, so when you, I'm going to go back here, because that's showing a little bit too much of the mistakes I've made. When you search for ingredients, you can search for mushrooms and say, yes, I want all the mushroom dishes shown to me, or you can say, I'm allergic to peanuts, and say, no, I don't want any dish that has peanuts in it, and that'll also filter what the menu has to show you.
I have a question for you.
Yeah.
So from a marketing standpoint, I'm just trying to picture how you're going to be getting demand. So are you thinking grassroots end user to get demand from the end user so that more restaurants want to participate, or are you looking at working directly at marketing to restaurants to help them differentiate by being able to offer something like this?
So we're starting in the farm-to-table space because we've already believed that pre-qualifies. Farm-to-table restaurants want their diners to know where their food is coming from, and people who frequent farm-to-table restaurants are naturally curious about where their food is coming from, and that, I think, is where we're going to get the foot in the door, basically. Once we build this big transparent network of farm-to-table restaurants, farms, and consumers that rely on it, we're going to put this sticker in the restaurant window, by the way, and if they have Diner Diver at their restaurant, then people will know, okay, I can go in and I can bring that menu up on my phone. And once they start using that, we're going to have, I think there's going to be some companies who want to essentially join in, okay, who we're not targeting initially because maybe they're a fast food chain or a chain of burger joints like Red Robin or whatever, but they might want this functionality to show their to show their diners as well. So that's where we're starting with farm-to-table restaurants, and we're going to be expanding as consumer demand increases.
And will you track the data to be able to then show when you want to scale up and maybe work with some of these larger companies, maybe show some numbers as to how people finding those restaurants, this farm-to-table via this app, how that drove business to them to be able to also use as you're working with other companies?
Yeah, tracking data is one of those, that might be the Achilles heel, actually, is we're not going to lay claim to anybody's data. The restaurant's going to have their own data about, you know, how Diner Diver is helping them sell different foods, et cetera, like that. We'll have to pay for that if we want to amass all of our, but hopefully by that time, if we got 20 or 30 restaurants out there using it, we'll have made enough in terms of revenue from sales, et cetera, to be able to tap into that. And we could bake that into their license agreement, but right now, based on the way, based on my philosophy, I'm not really that interested. So I guess I'm going to be mostly relying on how often my phone rings, which is probably never. But if you want this, you got to ring my phone. Yeah, John.
I think you've got a lot of challenges ahead, but that said, I think you're really on the cusp of something, because like what you said, there's so many terms now about eating healthy and everything, it kind of becomes a din, and it's like, wow, this is this and this and this, but to me, it all boils down to, and I'm going to use this term right now because it's popular, organic. And my wife is everything organic, you know, she's at Metro Center's, you know, farmer's market every time she can be, and she's kind of got me into, okay, yeah, I should, you know, it's about starting with one person, creating an interest, creating a movement, and with this more specified, eventually it's going to be like, wow, what is, you know, what is in this stuff, and maybe it's not the person going in and thinking, I need to know exactly about my mushrooms, but it's going into a restaurant and seeing that they've got your label on the window and being more, you know, at ease about the health of what they're eating and whatever. So, I mean, cool. Good for you. Keep going.
Thanks. Yeah.
Brian, I thought, do you see this replacing whatever application the restaurant uses to develop their menus? Or do you see this as something that can power or be like an app within what tools they use to create their menus?
So, yeah, that's going to be a challenge primarily because it seems like no two restaurants use the same tools to build their menus. And that's what we want to do is we want to build scrapers that go out, and if you're a restaurant and your menu's online, and we want to like automate the scaffolding that you're going to require. But then once your menu is in the diner, it won't be in the app, it'll be in one of the restaurant workbenches. Once the menu is in the workbench, then you can start adding who supplies, which farm supplies the onions, which farm supplies the milk, and you can start essentially making those tie-ins so that you're able to serve the information up to your diners. So, you know, obviously all these apps out there that help restaurants build menus, they don't have this on their radar. So we may end up talking to some of these applications and say, hey, if your restaurant who's making a menu through your site sends you a JSON file that's decked out like this, can you use that data? Most paper restaurant menus, they can't put all this information on it. And that's really the limitation of paper. And that's what we're trying to help restaurants overcome. Steve?
Follow up on your remarks there. One thing Brian's technology has really caught the eye is the rapid diagnostic industry. So he's been introduced to people who have developed technology for instant diagnostics of everything imaginable. So when you look at organic, well, that's a subjective word. So what specifically you're looking at? Preservative? Are you looking for an enzyme? Are you looking for a GMO marker? We'll find it. But with his system here, these people are talking to him like, this would be wonderful. And there's a unique story he told me about out in Colorado, what happened to the potatoes.
Yeah, I was at a blockchain summit in early October, and I was talking to people about food transparency and how blockchain can help in food transparency. And there was a cantaloupe an issue with cantaloupes and I think listeria in Colorado that decimated the cantaloupe industry in Colorado. Put a lot of people out of business, and some people, I think it's like 5 years later, 6 years later, are still trying to recover from, some farmers are still trying to recover their business because of the fact that Colorado was known to be a good source for cantaloupes, and all that changed because of one farm. Okay? Now, I don't like to talk about foodborne pathogens and the potential impact that Diner Diver and this technology might have on isolating what farm a particular bad batch came from, simply because it's not the bottleneck. Okay? Once we know that we're having a listeria outbreak or a salmonella outbreak or an E. coli outbreak, then it usually takes maybe another week to find out where the food came from. But it's those first few weeks, right, that where we don't know what it is, we're just sending people home with aspirin. And that's really got to change. We need things like rapid diagnostics to be able to quickly and inexpensively diagnose foodborne pathogens at the emergency room. And that's what's really not happening right now. So yeah, this is going to be a major player in that once we kind of turn our focus onto the healthcare industry. But right now, you know, we can say that we're going to be active in helping to reduce the impact of outbreaks in the future once this type of technology rolls out universally.
Are you going to see the need to do any sort of moderation or validation on the data that's coming in just to keep the credibility of the system, right? So someone puts in bad data, they say it's organic, but it's not, and then all of a sudden people kind of lose the confidence in the system, right? And
that's why we have to be aggressive in the decimation of the reputation of the people who put bad data in. You know, if it's okay. People put bad data everywhere. When you're using blockchain technology, though you can't erase what you've done, you can only replace it with a correcting entry. And so, you know, if somebody who's put some bad data in the blockchain steps up, says, oh my gosh, we should not have put this data in the blockchain, and they do the right thing and correct that data, then, you know, their reputation won't suffer as much as if, you know, we catch them consistently trying to put bad data into the system and gaming the system. Yeah, they're doomed. Mm-hmm. We're going to act quite aggressively. And Marcy?
Have you developed the workbenches, and who pays for the workbenches? Is that part of the licensing agreement? The restaurant's paying for the licensing agreement, and that comes as a package?
Right. So the business model for that, I'm kind of crazy in that I want to give everything away for free and just want to charge for the data. So as a farmer essentially sells their data to a restaurant, then I want to take like a little 2% sliver of what the, you know, financial transaction was there, and that's all I really want. But initially, it's going to cost to put a Raspberry Pi and a Wi-Fi router at each one of these farms. Now, the workbenches themselves, yeah, I've got some software that's being used as a workbench, and that's kind of in prototype stage. But I don't want to charge for that software, because eventually, if you divide the amount of hours put into building it versus the people who are out there using it, that should go to almost zero, right? So we're going to get more money eventually when this thing catches on by taxing or charging fees for moving the data around. And remember that the farmer's going to be benefiting from that as well. So,
why the need for the pies, SBCs, and is it just?
So we want to keep it inexpensive. I mean, one thing about farmers and farm-to-table restaurants is I haven't yet met a billionaire who runs a farm or a farm-to-table restaurant. So they're very price sensitive, and we're trying to.
Well, just compared to using their own computer.
Yeah, we want the software. We want the software to be open source, but we also want it to be on a permissioned blockchain.
Right.
And so, if they just use their own computer, as long as it can run like a Docker container or something like that that keeps it secure and using the firewall and the software that's been set up, fine. Yeah. Yeah, if they've already got a Wi-Fi router, I think the Wi-Fi router is more important to be locked down and secure at the restaurant than at the farm. But hackers these days, they try to get in everything. So the goal is to have kind of a proprietary model about how you publish information to the librarian and how you subscribe to that information. Okay.
All right, thank you so much, Brian. We do have one question that we like to ask all of our presenters at the end of the talks, and that is, Brian, what can we as a community do to help you?
Thank you. Yeah, I thought about that question because I know it gets asked at every Million Cups. I've asked it several times myself. I'm about to go into the customer discovery phase. This is something we go through at Brave Launch. I went through Brave Launch 3 years ago, and I'm going to be doing that same thing right now. I need to talk to at least 100 people. I need to sit down and interview them. I need to show them what I just showed you. I need to walk them through, and I need to get their feedback. People who are in the food service industry, who are in the agricultural industry, I need to be able to talk to and interview people, and that's really what I guess my ask is this morning. I'd like to talk to everyone in the room who's interested in giving me some feedback one-on-one. I'd like to talk to anyone you might know who's a farmer or a restaurant owner or whatever, to see if I can capture some of their takes on this, because I'm trying to build up this understanding of the marketplace I'm entering. I think I've thought about this enough that, and nobody's told me right so far that I'm on the wrong track, but I need to verify that. So that would really be my ask. I've got a bunch of business cards here, and maybe if you take the business card and write down on the back of it, needs interviewees or something like that, and then try to think of somebody who I should probably talk to. I mean, that's one of the things that I run into a lot is I get 2 pieces of feedback whenever I talk to somebody about this, but I haven't really shown anyone what I'm trying to do as far as the user interface goes until this morning. But I always get, man, that's a good idea, and I've never heard of anybody doing that. Okay, and I'm trying to find that person who's heard of somebody else doing this, because I agree with them. I think this is a good idea, and I'm hoping that it's successful. So, well, thank you very much for the opportunity.